After I became a millionaire, he told me something I had prayed was a lie. My name is Caroline Hayes. I'm the founder and owner of Meridian Capital Advisory, a wealth management firm with offices across Manhattan's financial district. I built it from nothing, just a business degree, a rented desk, and an unshakable belief that I could predict market patterns better than men twice my age. I was right. But this story isn't about how I made my fortune. It's about what I discovered the night the money finally stopped mattering. It was a December evening in Boston, where I'd flown for the holidays. Snow fell past the floor-to-ceiling windows of my childhood home, the same house I'd bought back and restored after my father passed. Every cashmere curtain and marble countertop a testament to how far I'd climbed. I was standing in the library, a glass of Chateau Margaux in my hand, when my older brother Daniel walked in with that look on his face, the one that meant he was carrying something heavy. "We need to talk about Dad," he said quietly. My chest tightened. We'd buried our father 3 years earlier. What could possibly be left to say? Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe for the next journeys. I'd spent my entire adult life chasing my father's approval. Even after he was gone, I kept building, kept succeeding, as if somehow he'd see it from wherever he was. The firm, the properties, the board seats. All of it was a monument to the daughter he'd raised to be exceptional. Daniel sat down on the leather sofa, his hands clasped between his knees. Outside, Boston's Beacon Hill glowed with historic street lamps and holiday lights, the kind of old-money elegance I'd once envied and now owned. "There's something you should know," he began, "about why Dad was the way he was, about why he pushed you so hard." I felt something crack open inside me. Just a hairline fracture, but enough to let the cold in. "What are you talking about?" He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pity, maybe. Or sorrow for what he was about to break. "Not yet," he said, his voice catching. "I need you to understand the context first." The next morning, I woke to the kind of silence only wealth can buy. My bedroom in the Boston house overlooked the private garden. Bare birch trees and sculpted hedges dusted with fresh snow. I designed this room myself after buying back the property. Pale gray linens, a chandelier from a Parisian estate sale, art I'd collected from galleries in Soho. Everything perfect, everything controlled. I'd built a life where I controlled every variable, except this. I made my coffee in the chef's kitchen. Marble counters, sub-zero appliances, copper pots hanging like sculptures, but I couldn't taste it. Daniel's words from the night before circled in my mind like vultures. "There's something you should know about Dad." I tried to focus on work. I had a video call with my team in New York at 9, a portfolio review that required my full attention. I set up my laptop in the library, the same room where Daniel had dropped his cryptic warning, and spent 2 hours discussing asset allocations and hedge fund performances with people who trusted me with their generational wealth. But even as I spoke about risk management and market forecasts, my father's voice echoed in my memory. "Average is unacceptable, Caroline. Average is invisible." He'd said that to me when I was 12, standing in this very library after I'd brought home a report card with a single B+. Not even a B. A B+. I remembered how his disappointment had felt like ice water in my veins, how I'd sworn I'd never see that look on his face again. And I never did. I became valedictorian, full scholarship to Wharton, youngest VP at my first firm. Then I left to build my own empire, just to prove I could. After the call ended, I wandered through the house. My heels clicked against the restored hardwood floors, past family portraits I'd had professionally reframed, past the piano room where I'd practiced Chopin until my fingers bled, because my father believed excellence required sacrifice. The house felt different now, like a museum of a life I thought I understood. I found myself standing in front of my father's study. The one room I hadn't changed. I'd kept it exactly as he'd left it. The mahogany desk, the leather chair, the shelves lined with first editions and financial journals. His reading glasses still sat on the desk, folded next to a brass lamp. I'd preserved it like a shrine. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Winter light filtered through the windows, catching dust motes in the air. Everything smelled faintly of his cologne, something woody and expensive that I'd stopped wearing myself because it hurt too much. I sat in his chair, running my fingers along the worn armrests. How many hours had he spent here, building his own career? He'd been a litigation attorney, formidable and precise. People feared him in courtrooms. I'd been proud of that fear. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Can you meet me at the cafe on Charles Street? 1 hour. Please." I stared at the message. That word, please, wasn't like him. Daniel was 8 years older, steady and measured. He'd taken over Dad's law practice, married his college sweetheart, had 3 kids. He was the stable one. I was the ambitious one. We'd always known our roles. But something in his tone last night had been off. Fractured. I texted back, "I'll be there." The cafe was one of those quintessential Boston spots. Brick walls, small tables, the smell of espresso and baked goods. I arrived first, ordered a cappuccino I wouldn't drink, and sat by the window watching Beacon Hill residents walk their dogs through the snow. When Daniel arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were shadowed, his coat wrinkled. He sat down heavily across from me. "I'm sorry about last night," he said. "I shouldn't have brought it up like that." "Then why did you?" He was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into his coffee with mechanical precision. One packet, then another, the spoon clinking against porcelain. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he finally said, "and because I can't carry it alone anymore." My heart started beating faster. "Daniel, you're scaring me. Do you remember Mom's sister, Aunt Grace?" I frowned. "Vaguely. She lived in California, right? I think I met her twice. 3 times. At your graduation, at Dad's funeral, and once when you were very young." He paused. "She tried to stay in touch with you. Dad wouldn't allow it." "What? Why would he?" "She knew something about him," Daniel interrupted. "Something he didn't want anyone to know, especially not you." The cafe noise faded to white sound. Outside, snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, burying the streets in silence. What did she know? Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Old, yellowed at the edges. My name was written across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. Elegant, feminine, careful. "She sent this to me before she passed away last month," he said quietly, "with instructions to give it to you when I thought you were ready." I stared at the envelope like it might burn me. "I don't know if you're ready," Daniel continued. "I don't know if anyone could be ready for this. But I think you need to read it. I think you need to understand why Dad pushed you the way he did. Why nothing you accomplished was ever quite enough." He slid the envelope across the table. I didn't touch it. "What's in it?" "The truth about who he was," Daniel said, "and who you were to him." My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table, against the cold wood, trying to anchor myself. "Just tell me." "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "This is something you need to hear in her words, not mine." He stood up, leaving the envelope between us like evidence at a crime scene. "I'll be at the house when you're ready to talk," he said. "Take your time." Then he walked out into the snow, leaving me alone with a piece of paper that promised to rewrite everything I thought I knew about the man who shaped my entire life. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at my name written in a stranger's hand. Then I picked up the envelope and walked out into the December cold. I didn't open the envelope right away. Instead, I walked. Through the snow-covered streets of Beacon Hill, past the brick townhouses with their gas lamps and black shutters, past the wrought iron fences and perfectly manicured winter gardens. My cashmere coat kept out the cold, but nothing could stop the chill spreading through my chest. The envelope felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my handbag. I found myself at the public garden, standing by the frozen pond where the swan boat sat dormant for winter. The willow trees were skeletal against the gray sky, their branches heavy with ice. I'd come here as a child, holding my father's hand while he told me about the importance of discipline and focus. Success isn't luck, Caroline. It's precision. It's refusing to accept anything less than perfection. I'd built my entire identity around those words. What if they'd been built on something I didn't understand? I sat on a bench, brushed snow from the wooden slats, and finally pulled out the envelope. My fingers were numb. From cold or fear, I couldn't tell. The paper was thin, delicate. I turned it over, saw where the seal had already been broken. Daniel had read this. He knew what was inside. I thought about my father's study, preserved like a monument. I thought about all the nights I'd worked until 3 a.m, building my firm, proving myself. To whom? To him. To the ghost of his expectations, or to someone I'd never really known at all. A woman walked past with a golden retriever, both of them leaving tracks in the fresh snow. Normal. Easy. I wondered what it felt like to live a life that simple, where the past stayed buried and fathers were just fathers. I opened the envelope. The letter inside was handwritten, several pages thick, dated 3 months before Aunt Grace's death. I recognized her name from the signature at the bottom, but I had to search my memory for her face. A tall woman with kind eyes. She'd hugged me at my father's funeral and I'd barely registered it, too numb with grief and too busy managing the logistics of death. Dear Caroline, it began. If you're reading this, it means Daniel has decided you're ready to know. I pray he's right. I pray this brings you peace and not more pain, though I know how complicated truth can be. I need to tell you about your father, not the man you knew, the brilliant attorney, the demanding parent, the perfectionist who pushed you toward excellence. I need to tell you about the boy he was before life taught him to be so hard. My breath caught. I looked up at the frozen pond, at the city beyond, trying to steady myself. Your father and I grew up together. Did you know that? We were neighbors in South Boston, back when this city was different, rougher. His father, your grandfather, worked at the shipyard. His mother cleaned houses. They were good people, but poor. Invisibly poor. I'd never met my paternal grandparents. They died before I was born, and my father never spoke about them. I'd assumed it was grief, that talking about them hurt too much. Your father was brilliant even then, the letter continued. Scholarship to Boston Latin School, then Harvard on a full ride. He clawed his way out of poverty with nothing but his mind and his will. But something broke in him along the way. Some part of him never stopped being that poor boy from Southie, terrified of sliding back into invisibility. I closed my eyes. The snow fell harder now, catching on my eyelashes. He married your mother because she came from the right family. Beacon Hill lineage, old money, connections. I watched him transform himself. New accent, new wardrobe, new everything. He erased where he came from. And when you were born... The letter paused there. A literal space on the page. as if Aunt Grace had needed to gather courage. When you were born, you looked exactly like his mother, your grandmother. The same eyes, the same face. I saw it immediately. So did he. My hand started shaking so hard I almost dropped the pages. And I think it terrified him, Caroline. I think every time he looked at you, he saw where he came from. He saw poverty and struggle and everything he'd worked so hard to escape. So he pushed you. Not because you weren't enough, but because he was trying to make absolutely certain you'd never know the life he'd left behind. A sound escaped my throat, half laugh, half sob. All those years, all that striving. All those nights I'd stayed awake wondering why I could never quite earn his full approval. Why every achievement felt like it fell just short of enough. It had never been about me at all. I was a mirror he couldn't bear to look at. There's more, the letter continued, and my stomach dropped. Something your father told me the night before your Harvard graduation. We'd had wine, too much wine, and his guard came down. He said something I've never forgotten. I didn't want to read the next line. I wanted to throw the letter into the frozen pond and walk away, preserve whatever was left of the man I thought I'd known. But my eyes kept moving down the page. He said, I gave her everything I never had. And somehow that makes me angrier than if I'd given her nothing at all. The world went very still. Snow fell. The city breathed. And I sat there holding proof that my father's love had been tangled with resentment I'd spent 34 years trying to untangle without ever knowing the knot existed. But even this wasn't the whole truth. I could feel it. The weight of something still unspoken, hiding in the remaining pages of Aunt Grace's careful handwriting. I looked down at the letter, at the words that continued below, and felt my heart begin to break in ways I didn't yet understand. But that's not the hardest part of this story, Caroline. The hardest part is what he told me 6 months before he died. I couldn't read any further sitting on that bench. The snow was falling too hard, the ink beginning to blur. Or maybe it was my vision blurring. Tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not in public where someone might see the formidable Caroline Hayes coming undone. I walked back to the house in a daze, clutching the letter inside my coat like stolen evidence. The streets of Beacon Hill blurred past me. The same streets where my father had reinvented himself. Where he'd learned to sound like old money. To move like he'd always belonged. The same streets where I'd grown up never knowing I was living in a performance. Back in the library, I poured myself a whiskey I didn't want and sat in the window seat, the one that overlooked the garden. The light was fading, that particular winter twilight that turns everything blue and lonely. I picked up the letter again, my hand steadier now, and continued reading where I'd left off. But that's not the hardest part of this story, Caroline. The hardest part is what he told me 6 months before he died. We were at the house, your house now, the one he'd fought so hard to buy in the right neighborhood. He'd just come from the doctor. He knew his heart was failing, though he hadn't told anyone yet. Not even your mother. We sat in his study, and he said something that's haunted me every day since. I stopped breathing. He said, I need to tell someone the truth before I die. I need to say it out loud, just once. And then he told me about the real reason he pushed you so relentlessly. The reason that had nothing to do with poverty or fear or his own childhood wounds. My vision tunneled. The library walls seemed to press inward. When Caroline was 8 years old, he said, she came to my office after school. Do you remember? It was a Thursday. She'd won some academic competition, spelling bee, science fair, something. She was so excited, bouncing on her heels, waiting for me to notice. I did remember. Not clearly, but in fragments. My father's office downtown, all dark wood and important books. The smell of leather and paper. How small I'd felt in that enormous space. I was on a phone call, he continued. An important case. And she kept interrupting, pulling on my sleeve, saying, "Daddy, look, Daddy, I won," over and over. And he stopped talking. I'd never seen your father cry, Caroline. Not once in 40 years. But that day, his voice broke. I told her to be quiet. I said, "Can't you see I'm busy? Stop acting like a child who needs constant attention. Winners don't beg for applause. They earn respect through consistent excellence, not one-time achievements." The memory crashed over me like cold water. I'd buried it so deep I'd forgotten it existed. But now I could see it perfectly. My blue ribbon clutched in my small hand, my father's irritated expression, the way I'd gone completely still, the way I'd learned, in that single moment, that love had to be earned through perfection. "She never interrupted me again," your father said. "Never asked for praise, never showed me her report cards first, never came to me with excitement. She just worked. Harder and harder, quieter and quieter. And I told myself that was good, that I was teaching her resilience. But the truth is, Grace, the truth is, I broke something in her that day. I saw it happen. I watched her little face close down, watched her learn to need nothing from anyone. And instead of fixing it, I convinced myself it made her stronger." The whiskey glass slipped from my hand, amber liquid spreading across the hardwood like a wound. "Every success after that," he told me, "felt like proof I'd been right. Look how accomplished she is. Look how driven. See? My methods worked." But 6 months ago, I saw her give a speech at some financial conference. It was on television. She was brilliant, poised, articulate, commanding the room. And afterwards, when people congratulated her, she smiled and thanked them. But her eyes were completely empty. Like she was going through motions she'd memorized. Like she'd forgotten how to actually feel proud of herself. And I realized, your father said, that I didn't make her strong. I made her hollow. I taught her to achieve without joy, to succeed without satisfaction. I turned her into someone who can't stop proving herself because she learned too young that love is conditional, that she's only valuable when she's useful. I was crying now, silent tears that I couldn't control. I asked him why he never told you this. Grace's letter continued. Why he never apologized, never tried to undo the damage. And he said, and this is what I need you to hear, Caroline. He said, "Because I don't know how to love without conditions. I never learned. And I'm terrified that if I tell her the truth, if I show her I'm just a broken man who broke his daughter, she'll stop trying to earn something from me. And then I'll have nothing left of her at all." The letter fell from my hands. I sat there in the darkening library, in the house I'd bought to prove something to a dead man, surrounded by all the expensive things I'd acquired to fill the hollowness he'd carved into me when I was 8 years old. And for the first time in 26 years, I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd lost. Not his approval. I'd never actually had that to lose. I'd lost the ability to want anything for myself. To do anything just because it brought me joy. I'd built an empire on the foundation of a child's wound, and I'd called it success. My phone rang. Daniel's name on the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked upstairs to my bedroom, lay down on the perfect gray linens in the perfect room I'd designed, and stared at the ceiling until the winter dark swallowed everything. Because the hardest part wasn't knowing my father had broken me. The hardest part was realizing I'd spent my entire adult life proving him right. Choosing achievement over connection, success over happiness, control over vulnerability. I'd become exactly what he'd made me. And I'd done it willingly, brilliantly, perfectly. And now I didn't know who I was underneath all that armor. But there was still more to Aunt Grace's letter. Pages I hadn't read yet. A revelation my father had shared 6 months before his death that Daniel said I needed to understand. The complete truth was still waiting, and I was terrified of what it would cost me to finally hear it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in the dark, watching shadows move across the ceiling, listening to the old house settle around me. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like my father's footsteps in the hallway. Every gust of wind against the windows felt like his disappointment pressing in. At 3 a.m, I got up and went back to the library. The whiskey stain had dried on the floor. I'd deal with it later. I picked up Aunt Grace's letter from where I'd dropped it, smoothed the wrinkled pages, and made myself read the rest. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I'd moved past fear into something colder. Acceptance, maybe. Or just exhaustion. I know this is painful to read, Grace's letter continued. I debated for years whether you should ever know. But your father asked me to tell you, eventually. When she's ready, he said. When she's built enough that this won't destroy her. I think what he meant was, when you were strong enough to hear that your strength was born from a wound. I closed my eyes. Even from the grave, he was still measuring me. Still deciding when I was ready. What I could handle. How much truth I could bear. But there's something else. Something your father told me that last day that changes everything you think you know about why he pushed you. My heart started beating faster. He said that after that day in his office, after he saw what his words did to you, he tried to change. He really did. He'd come home from work planning to praise you for something, anything, to tell you he was proud, to hug you without waiting for you to earn it first. But every time he tried, he'd freeze. The words would die in his throat, because acknowledging what he'd done wrong meant admitting he'd damaged the person he loved most in the world. And your father, brilliant, accomplished, formidable, couldn't bear being wrong about something that mattered. So instead, he doubled down. He convinced himself that his methods were producing results, that you were thriving, that the distance between you was necessary for your excellence. It was easier, he told me, to believe I was building her into something extraordinary than to admit I'd broken something that was already perfect. I set the letter down and walked to the window. Outside, the garden was buried in snow, white and pristine and frozen, beautiful in a way that required everything living to go dormant. That's what I'd done, wasn't it? I'd buried everything soft and living in myself under layers of achievement and control, made myself winter. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant in New York. Client wants to move the Thursday meeting to Wednesday. Should I confirm? I stared at the message, the machinery of my life, turning without me. Meetings and markets and money, all the things I'd used to prove I was valuable. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the letter again. Now here's the part your father made me promise to tell you, Grace wrote. 6 months before he died, he did something he'd never done before. He went to therapy. That shocked me more than anything else in the letter. My father, who believed vulnerability was weakness, who thought asking for help was admitting defeat. In therapy? He went because he'd started having panic attacks, the letter explained. His heart condition was worsening, and he was terrified of dying with things unsaid. The therapist helped him understand something crucial. Your father realized that he'd been trying to make you into what he wished he'd been. Someone who never needed anyone, who was completely self-sufficient, who couldn't be hurt by poverty or loss or rejection because she was too successful to touch. But in doing that, he'd taught you that needing people was weakness, that vulnerability was failure, that love had to be earned through achievement rather than given freely. And the panic attacks, the therapist explained, were coming from a simple truth he couldn't escape. He desperately wanted you to need him, to come to him not with accomplishments, but with fears, questions, uncertainties. He wanted to be your father, not your coach. But he'd trained you so well that you didn't know how to need anyone anymore. I made her so strong she doesn't need me, he told me, crying. And now I'm dying, and she's going to be fine. She's going to achieve more, and build more, and succeed more. And she's going to do it all alone, thinking that's strength, when really it's just the scar I left on her. A sob broke from my throat before I could stop it. Because he was right. I was alone. Brilliantly, successfully, perfectly alone. I had business partners, but no real friends. I had lovers, but no one who knew me. I had money and power and respect, and I came home every night to empty houses in different cities, eating takeout over my laptop, calling it ambition. I dated, of course. Successful men who appreciated my drive, who didn't ask for too much, who eventually left when they realized I couldn't let anyone pass the armor. "You're not actually here," one of them had said when we broke up. "You're physically present but emotionally untouchable. It's like dating a beautiful statue." I'd told myself he simply couldn't handle a strong woman. But the truth was simpler and more painful. I didn't know how to let anyone in. My father had taught me that needing people was weakness, and I'd learned the lesson perfectly. Before he died, Grace's letter continued, "Your father wrote you a letter. He gave it to me sealed, with instructions to include it with mine. He said, 'Give her this when she understands, when she's ready to hear that I'm sorry, when she's ready to know that everything I did wrong came from loving her too much and knowing how to love too little.'" My hands trembled as I reached into the envelope. There, beneath Grace's pages, was another letter, smaller, in my father's precise handwriting. I held it for a long moment, this final message from a man I'd spent my whole life trying to please and prove wrong simultaneously. Then, as the winter sun began to rise over Boston, painting the snow-covered garden in shades of gold and pink, I unfolded my father's letter and began to read the words he'd been too afraid to say while he was alive. My father's handwriting was shakier than I remembered. The letter was dated 8 months before his death, 2 months after his conversation with Grace, during those final seasons when his heart was failing and he knew time was running out. "Caroline, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And Grace has decided you're strong enough to hear what I was too weak to say, while I could still look you in the eyes. I don't know how to begin, except with the truth. I failed you. Not because I didn't push you hard enough or because I pushed you too hard. I failed you because I taught you that achievement was love, when really love should have been given freely, without conditions, without scorecards. I want to tell you something I never said out loud. When you were born and the nurse placed you in my arms, I felt something I'd never felt before. Pure terror. Not because you were fragile, though you were, but because I knew, instantly, that you were the only thing in my life I could truly fail at. I could lose cases. I could lose money. I could lose respect. But losing you, damaging you, would be unforgivable. So I tried to make you invincible. I thought if I made you strong enough, smart enough, successful enough, nothing could ever hurt you. The world couldn't reject you if you were too accomplished to ignore. Poverty couldn't touch you if you built enough wealth. Loneliness couldn't find you if you didn't need anyone. I was wrong. Strength without connection is just isolation. Success without joy is just motion. And I'm afraid I taught you to confuse the two. I had to stop reading. My chest felt too tight, like something was breaking open that had been sealed for decades. Outside, Boston was waking up. I could hear cars on the street, the distant sound of snowplows, the city returning to life. But in this library, time felt suspended. I kept reading. There's something I need you to know about the last year of my life. After my diagnosis, after I started therapy, I tried to change how I spoke to you. Do you remember? And suddenly, I did. The last year before his death, my father had started calling me more often. Not to critique my business decisions or ask about my portfolio performance, just to talk. About books he was reading, about the garden, about nothing important. I'd found it strange, uncomfortable even. We didn't do casual conversation. We did strategy sessions and intellectual debates and achievement reviews. So I'd kept the calls short, always finding a reason to cut them off. I'm heading into a meeting, Dad. Can we talk later? Later never came. I was trying to learn how to just be your father, his letter continued. Not your coach or your critic or your measuring stick, just someone who loved you without needing you to earn it. But I'd trained you too well. You didn't know how to have a conversation that wasn't about accomplishments. And I didn't know how to tell you that I just wanted to hear your voice, not your victories. So we stayed in our old pattern. And I died without ever telling you the most important thing. My hands were shaking again. The words on the page blurred. The most important thing is this. You were enough. You were always enough. From the moment you were born, before you achieved a single thing, you were enough. And everything I pushed you to become, all the success, all the wealth, all the power, none of it made you more worthy of love than you already were at 8 years old, standing in my office with a blue ribbon, just wanting me to see you. I saw you, Caroline. I always saw you. I just didn't know how to show you that seeing you was enough, that you didn't have to be extraordinary to be loved. You just had to be you. A sound came out of me, raw and broken. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to hold it in. But the grief was too big. It had been building for 34 years, since the day I learned to stop asking for love and start earning approval instead. I know I can't undo the damage I did, the letter went on. I can't give you back the childhood where you felt unconditionally loved. I can't erase the voice in your head that tells you you're only valuable when you're achieving. But I can tell you this. The person you are underneath all those accomplishments, the one who loves classical music and cherry blossoms and the way light looks on water, the one who used to laugh so easily before I taught you to measure everything, she's still there. And she deserves to live a life that's about more than proving herself. She deserves joy, connection, messiness, mistakes, all the human things I taught you to avoid. I thought about my life in New York, the pristine apartment, the carefully curated relationships, the calendar filled with obligations and achievements, no room for spontaneity, no space for anything that didn't serve a purpose. I'd built a monument to efficiency and called it a life. There's one more thing, my father's letter said, and I felt my breath catch. Something I need to tell you that I was too ashamed to say while I was alive. Something Grace doesn't even know. My heart started pounding. The real reason I pushed you so hard had nothing to do with my childhood or my fears or my own insecurities. The world seemed to tilt. It had everything to do with a choice I made when you were 7 years old. A choice that shaped everything that came after. A choice I've regretted every single day since. I gripped the letter so hard the paper crumpled at the edges. There was an opportunity, a partnership at a major firm in Chicago. It would have meant a better quality of life for our family. More time at home. Less pressure. Your mother wanted me to take it desperately. But it would have meant being a smaller fish in a bigger pond. It would have meant admitting I'd climbed as high as I could on my own. It would have meant accepting that I was good, but not great. So I turned it down. I stayed in Boston, took on more cases, worked longer hours. I built a reputation and a practice and a name. And I told myself I was doing it for you, giving you a model of excellence, showing you what was possible. But the truth is, I was doing it for me, for my ego, for the boy from South Boston who needed to prove he belonged in those rooms. And in choosing my ambition over my family, I taught you to do the same. The room was spinning now. Your mother never forgave me for it, he wrote. Our marriage became a partnership, not a love story. And you grew up watching two people who were too proud to choose each other, too successful to admit they'd made a mistake. So when you became an adult, and I saw you making the same choices, building your career at the expense of everything else, choosing achievement over connection, success over happiness, I should have warned you. I should have said, don't make my mistakes. Don't sacrifice your life for your legacy. But I couldn't. Because admitting you were on the wrong path meant admitting I'd led you there. So instead, I pushed you harder, hoping somehow you'd succeed where I'd failed, hoping your achievements would retroactively justify my choices. And in doing that, I condemned you to the same loneliness I've lived with for 30 years. The letter ended there, except for one final line. Forgive me. And more importantly, forgive yourself for believing you had to earn love. You never did. You were always enough. Dad, I sat there in the growing morning light, holding my father's confession, and felt something shift deep inside me. Not healing, not yet, but understanding. The kind that cracks you open before it can put you back together. My phone rang. Daniel again. This time I answered. I read it, I said, my voice raw. All of it? All of it. There was a long silence. Then, what do you need? And for the first time in 26 years, I told the truth. I don't know. Daniel came over within the hour. We sat in the library together, the winter sun streaming through the windows, and I told him everything I'd read, everything I'd understood, everything I'd spent 3 decades not understanding. He listened without interrupting, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept either. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. There's one more thing, he said finally. Something Dad told me the night before he died. Something he made me promise to tell you, but only after you'd read the letters. My stomach dropped. What? Daniel set down his mug and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Part sadness, part something else. Relief, maybe. He told me that the partnership in Chicago, the one he turned down, they'd offered it to him because of a recommendation. Someone had specifically requested him for the team. Who? Mom's father, your grandfather. Daniel's voice was gentle. He'd pulled strings to get Dad that opportunity. It was his way of welcoming Dad into the family, of saying he was good enough exactly as he was. The words hit me like a physical blow. And Dad turned it down because accepting help felt like admitting he couldn't do it alone, Daniel finished. Because he'd spent so long proving he didn't need anyone that he couldn't accept love when it was offered freely. I closed my eyes. My father had rejected the very thing he'd spent his life craving, unconditional acceptance, because he couldn't recognize it when it appeared, and he'd taught me to do exactly the same thing. That's not all, Daniel said quietly. After Dad died, I found something in his desk. Bank statements. For an account I didn't know about. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo of a document. It was a trust fund, established when I was 8 years old. The year of the spelling bee. The year everything changed. He set this up the week after that day in his office, Daniel explained. He never touched it. Just kept adding to it year after year. It's worth almost $3 million now. I don't understand. Read the beneficiary designation. I looked. The fund was set up for me, but with specific instructions. It could only be accessed for one purpose: to provide financial support in the event the primary beneficiary chooses to pursue a life change, prioritizing personal fulfillment over financial achievement. The words blurred on the screen. He was preparing for the day you might quit, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. The day you might choose happiness over success. He wanted to make sure money would never be the reason you stayed trapped in a life that hollowed you out. But he never told me. I know. Daniel's eyes were wet. I think he was ashamed. He'd pushed you so hard toward achievement that telling you it was okay to walk away felt like admitting he'd wasted your potential. So the money just sat there, waiting for a conversation he never had the courage to start. I thought about all those phone calls that last year. My father trying to connect, and me deflecting because I didn't know how to have a relationship that wasn't about performance. He'd been trying to tell me. In his own broken way, he'd been trying to say, "You can stop now. You can rest. You're enough." And I'd been too well trained to hear it. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I whispered. Daniel reached across and took my hand, something we hadn't done since we were children. "Whatever you want," he said. "That's the whole point. Dad spent his life choosing wrong. He gave you the chance to choose differently." That was 3 months ago. I'm still in Boston. I haven't gone back to New York except to meet with my partners and tell them I'm stepping back. Not quitting, not yet, but stepping back, delegating, creating space. They were surprised, but supportive. "You've built something that runs without you," my VP said. "That's the sign of a great leader." But I'm not sure I'm ready to call it leadership. I think it might just be the first healthy boundary I've ever set. I'm learning to do things that serve no purpose except joy. I started taking piano lessons again, not to perfect Chopin, but to play badly and laugh at my mistakes. I joined a book club at a local cafe where we read novels I'd never have time for before. I even went on a date with a man who teaches high school English and has never heard of my firm. It was terrifying, and ordinary, and kind of wonderful. Daniel and I have dinner every week now. Sometimes we talk about Dad, sometimes we don't. His kids call me Aunt Caroline and argue over who gets to sit next to me. I'm learning what it feels like to be loved without having to earn it. I'm also in therapy, twice a week, working through 3 decades of measuring my worth by my achievements. It's slow. It's painful. Some days I want to quit and go back to the familiar comfort of overworking. But I'm learning that healing isn't an achievement. It's a practice. And it's okay to be bad at it while I figure it out. Yesterday I was back in my father's study, the room I've finally started to change. I'm turning it into something else. A reading room, maybe. Or a music room. Something that's mine, not a shrine to a complicated man. I was packing up his books when I found one more letter, tucked inside his copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It was addressed to me, dated 2 days before he died, shorter than the others. Just a few lines in his shakiest handwriting. "Caroline, I never told you this, but the day you were born, I made a promise. I promised I would give you every advantage I never had. I kept that promise. But here's what I should have promised instead. I will teach you that you are loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. I failed at that promise, but maybe you can keep it for yourself now. Choose joy, sweetheart. Choose mess. Choose people who see you, not just your resume. Choose the life I was too afraid to live. Choose better. I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying. After I became a millionaire, I thought I'd arrived. I thought success was the destination. That achievement would fill whatever was hollow inside me. But standing here in this house, I bought to prove something to a ghost, holding letters from a man who loved me imperfectly and knew it. I understand now that the money, the firm, the reputation, all of it was just the beginning. The real work, the real journey, is learning to be enough without earning it. Learning to be human again. And maybe, eventually, learning to forgive us both. My father for teaching me the wrong lessons, and myself for learning them so well. The snow has started melting in the garden. Spring is coming. And for the first time in as long as I can remember, I'm not planning 3 years ahead. I'm just here, present, imperfect, enough. And that, somehow, feels like the greatest achievement of all. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.